Welcome to the Titans of Industry show, and today I have one of the legendary guests that we have periodically on. It's a great interview for everyone, very entertaining, and if you've been brainwashed by the mainstream media, this is the different kind of brainwashing. This is the real, this is the real brainwashing that you need because this is truth, brutal honesty, and Bob Moriarty has been around forever and he's just been spot on with so many things. Has a new book out, which he's going to tell us about. And then, obviously, with being in France right now, he's also an American, but he's got an international view on things. Very right about the top with cryptocurrencies. We actually did an interview the last time he was on the show. It was January of 2018. He said this is the top, and sure enough, it was the top. So it's an amazing market timer, and I'm glad to have him back on the show. Bob, thank you.
Well, I'm pleased to be here. I thought you would never forgive me after me saying that was the top.
Well, I did not invent Bitcoin, and though our subscribers came into Bitcoin in 2017. Many of them, thousands, were already cashing out by the time it became euphoric because we were very early. Bitcoin 400, Ethereum $12. I mean, these prices are still well below what's going on right now. So they had a good time. They are having a good time, and obviously. We saw 2017 as the bubble. Let's start off with what's going on right now around the world, Bob, with populism. I'm right now. I'm in Utah, and over here in Park City, which is the big ski resort. It's one of the wealthiest areas in America. In fact, there are houses on the slopes here which are called 10-10-10 Club. It's $10 million, 10 days. Because they spend like 10 days on the slopes, and then on the flip side, 6:30 a.m. where I'm at right now in Salt Lake City, people are already bustling, going to work, and it's two realities, one America, and I can go to every city in America and find a very poor area, declining middle class, and then a very prosperous, wealthy class. It's just not what it used to be, where it was more of a level playing field. And I just wrote an article about the fact that in 1980 it was the peak affordability for the stock market. The year that gold covered the entire currency supply in the United States at $850 an ounce was the same year that it only took 100 hours for the average employee to buy one share of the Dow Jones. It now takes, it now takes forever. It takes like 500-600 hours to do that. It's just a different reality in a different country. Is the wealth gap in the United States right now severe? And with you being in Europe and especially in France, what's going on there with regards to populism?
Well, it's really going on everywhere. And you touched on it. It's the dichotomy between the wealthy, the 1%, and the poor. Every society has rich, every society has poor, no matter where you are in the world. That's always true. And it always will be true. You cannot eliminate the wealthy and you can't eliminate the poor. The stability of every society is based on the size and the prosperity of the middle class. Now, I grew up in a very middle class household, but we had a doctor whose kids were in school with me at the same age, and he was middle class, upper middle class. He wasn't wealthy. We had very few really true wealthy people. And I grew up in Fort Worth. There was a lot of oil money there. But today, the financial industry is like 35% of the United States economy, and manufacturing, I think, is down to 12%. The middle class is being destroyed through taxation. Uh, and the United States keeps fighting these insane wars that are going to bankrupt us. So we're on a path that's very dangerous. But strange enough, if you step back a little bit, we've had 15 weeks of rioting by the Yellow Vests in France. Last week, there were 200,000 protesters in Madrid, in Spain. There have been protests in Canada, and who the hell ever heard of anybody protesting in Canada except after a Canucks loss? They don't riot in Canada, for crying out loud. But you've had protests in Taiwan, you've had protests in Israel, and at the heart of the matter, it's exactly the same issue. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and they don't like it. And revolutions start when the dichotomy grows too big. And we're there. And if you go back and read the book that I wrote 3 years ago about war called The Art of Peace, I predicted a worldwide revolution. And I believe it's here. I believe it started. Very few people are talking about it yet. Nobody in the United States is talking about the Yellow Vests, but it's a big deal. This is how revolutions start.
You know, Bob, I really want to ask you about this further because it just seems daunting. You said nobody is talking about it, but I've been reading Ray Dalio's work for several months, and to him, he even went on the CNBC interview and said, "Look, this keeps me up at night. The rise of populism is the major topic of our times. It resembles the late 1930s, where 2008 resembled the Great Depression, and like in the Great Depression, they lowered interest rates to zero in 2008, and like the Great Depression, in the Great Recession of 2008, they stimulated the economy with cheap credit. Then they devalued the dollar. If you remember, they devalued the gold and confiscated it, etc. You had a economic boom, and you had a rising power with an existing power. Back then, it was the fighting in Europe, and the United States was rising, and right now you have China rising with the United States declining, and he just made all of these very distinct comparisons with charts, with logic, with everything, and he said, "Look, I'm not predicting war next, but the current situation, the social situation, is just resembling of the late 1930s, and you can see uprisings around the world." I want to ask you, and there's a very unique question: do you think that the population is dumbed down to a point where they won't revolt, or are we seeing the switch going off in people's minds? They're saying, "Look, I don't care how normal it looks on CNBC. My life isn't normal. I want change." And I want to ask you this because we do have Trump already in power, unheard of a few years ago. Everyone thought Hillary would do it, and I want to ask you: is this the beginning of a huge trend? And do you think that a revolution in Europe and in North America, do you think it will get to civil unrest?
Yes, absolutely. Here's what we need to think about, and if you disagree with me, tell me. Now, do you realize that Donald Trump was not elected president? Nobody went into the voting booth and said, "I want Donald Trump as president." Do you realize that?
What do you mean by that?
Well, they went into the voting booths, okay, and they had to vote, and they vote either for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. They didn't vote for Trump. They voted against Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton and the Democrats represented the status quo, higher taxes, government lying about everything, getting into wars all over the world, unlimited illegal immigration, and all of the issues that anger people. Hillary Clinton was the most despised candidate in U.S. history. And we talk about Donald Trump. The people who like him say, oh, God, this guy is so wonderful. And the people who hate him say, oh, but he's not Hillary Clinton. The revolution started in 2016. Now, the one thing that's clear to me is the American people are angry. Now, are they taking it out on the people they should be taking it out on? No, I don't think so. They should be taking it out on Congress. They should be taking it out on their local governments. They should be taking it out on the banks, because those are the guys behind it. Okay? The middle class is being destroyed in the United States, and they're angry and they're striking out, but they don't know which direction to strike out in. And if you see, I think it was Pelosi last week who said, you know, you need to take to the streets. Andrew McCabe was on 60 Minutes here a weekend ago, and he admitted that the FBI and the Department of Justice had started a coup d'etat against Trump. Now, I've been in riots. I don't know if you know it or not, but I flew airplanes, small airplanes, all over the world for about 20 years. And I've been in riots in Pakistan and in Egypt that were very dangerous, okay? And I didn't like being in those riots. Those are not good things. Coup d'etats never are peaceful, and they never work out the way people actually think they should work out. So I totally agree with Ray Dalio. I see a very dangerous time ahead that easily could be World War III.
Now, you mentioned where do people take their anger to, and I think it's very important because the rich are being blamed right now in America. They want to tax them more. They want to do a wealth. All the anger, the socialistic anger, is going towards the rich. The rich are only the beneficiaries of the system. They don't create the system. I'm not talking about the shadow elite type. The top 30, 40 families. I'm talking about the top 10% of America. 30 million people, they're not in any conspiracy to become rich. They happen to be the beneficiaries of low interest rates, of a boom in the stock market, a boom in globalism, etc. The people that facilitate this are the central banks and Congress. And I want to ask you this. If interest rates were right now at 6%, would the United States Treasury still be issuing bonds? I don't think so. It's not going to be sustainable for them. My question to you is, does the central bank, or do the American people need to demand that the central banks raise interest rates so that the savings of millions of Americans will start yielding fruit here, and that the Congress and Treasury would think twice, 3 times, 4 times before they go on another spending binge? The fact is, for the next 10 years, the United States is going to be suffering from a $1 trillion annual deficit. So they need to issue bonds for $10 trillion. And I don't see a lot of foreigners coming to the bids to finance this. This is going to be financed by either domestic or by the central banks most predominantly. This is a huge issue. I want to ask your opinion on it. Because where are they going to cut the fat from? What are they going to? What will Congress tighten the belt on? It's not like it's easy things to take off the agenda, like Social Security. You don't want to touch that, holy cow, and Medicare, Medicaid, and then you have education, defense. These are all the main issues. They're just too large with what population has become in America.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. But one of the things, and strange enough, that to the very best of my knowledge, I think I'm the only person talking about this. Let me give you an example. You have a friend, and your friend makes $70,000 a year, and he pays $20,000 a year in taxes, but he's spending $80,000 a year, and he's got $400,000 in student debt. If he came to you and said, "What do I do in a sentence?" would it be appropriate to tell him, "You need to learn to live within your means. You either need to earn more or spend less or both"? Would that make sense? Okay, if that's true of individuals, is it also not true of governments? Governments have a limit to how much they can spend because they collect it either in taxes or in inflation or they default. Okay, everything that government spends has to be paid. They get it in taxes, they get it in inflation, they get it in default. One of the three. But there is an absolute finite limit to what they can spend and be within their budget. And when we went off the gold standard, we went off the gold standard in 1933 for individuals and in 1971 for governments, we lost control of the money supply. Now, I am not a gold bug in that I believe that anybody should get down on their knees and pray to an altar of gold because it is a religion. It is not a religion. It is a commodity. It just happens to make very good money. But governments can't print gold, so they hate gold because gold forces them to live within their means. And that's all we have to do is go back to living within our means. And I like you a lot, but you're absolutely dead wrong on the deficits. The deficit's going to be a hell of a lot higher than $1 trillion a year. It was $1 trillion a year under Obama, and it's going to be more like 2.3 trillion this year. There is no way the U.S. government can fund the spending that they're planning on. Now, the military-industrial complex, and when that term was invented by Eisenhower, he actually called it the Congressional Military-Industrial Complex. And his speechwriters told him to take out congressional. You didn't want to insult Congress, even though he should have. But Congress in the United States has been bought, paid for by the defense industry. We spend more money on defense than the next 16 countries combined, and 15 of them are allies of ours, and the ships don't work, and the airplanes don't fly. It's absurd. We have to stop squandering money, and we need to start paying attention to what we need to pay attention to. Our medical system is utterly out of control. Our judicial system is a joke. The political system is a joke. And is that going to turn out well? No. There will be massive changes. Now, I actually argue that a worldwide revolution is a wonderful thing if everybody realized at the same time, hey, wait a minute, government spending is totally out of control. What could we do about it? The solution is simple. Go back to the gold standard. Not because I worship gold, not because I'm a gold bug. I am not a gold bug. It just happens to make good money.
How would governments go to a gold standard right now? Do you think that the governments need to nationalize their central banks and then do it? Do you think that because we're already seeing China is increasing their gold allocations again. We're seeing Russia obviously doing it. Many countries in the emerging Eurasia region. You're seeing Hungary doing it for the first time in ages. Just around the world right now. Obviously, with what happened with Venezuela and the Bank of England, and gold is on the rise. I mean, since bottoming in August, gold is up substantially, and since bottoming in November, silver is up pretty nicely as well. And this is going on while the stock market is rallying. So this is not a situation where investors are saying, "Hey, everything is going out of control. I need to buy some gold." No, stock market is doing phenomenally well. In fact, it's had the best opening of any calendar year since 1991, and it's en route to have the best Q1 since 1955. So definitely the stock market is doing phenomenally well, and gold is doing phenomenally well. So, what's the underlying, what's the fundamental thing that drives gold now? Is it that governments just do not trust other governments?
Yes, of course. I'm going to ask you kind of a trick question, and I collect fact.
I hate those, but okay.
I know you're going to hate this because it's something you should know, but you don't know. Do you have any idea of what the single best 11 months in U.S. stock market history was?
Could it be right after the Great Depression? I mean, I'm just because it's a trick question.
Yeah, no, it's not a trick question. It's a good question. It's something that everybody should know because then everything that ever happens has happened before. From July of 1932 until June of 1933, the Dow Jones went up 150%. Now, we were right in the depths of the Depression, okay? But the stock market still went up 150%. That was the greatest climb in 1 year in U.S. history. Now, your analogy to what's going on today compared to the Great Depression, I think is very good. And I'm going to answer the question about what I think the stock market's going to do. I think we're in 1937, okay? The stock market peaked in September of 1929. In late October, it began a crash. The crash continued until July of 1932. And then from July of 1932 until June of 1933, it went up 150%. And then it declined some more, and it went up to another peak in 1937, and then declined into the start of World War II. I believe that the analog would be we're in the same position today that we were in 1937. Now, as far as gold is concerned, I think that's different. We went off the gold standard in 1933, so you can ignore the price of gold. But we've got a situation where I'm not exactly sure the number. I'm told somewhere between 233 and 250 or 260 trillion dollars of debt, and it's never going to be paid. Okay, so we don't have to worry about Social Security and Medicare and pensions because we know that debt is never going to get paid. Now, governments never do the rational thing. In France, Macron is getting harsher with the protesters when they have made it crystal clear all over France. They're angry. He's taking harsher and harsher and harsher measures. And when they start shooting the protesters, then the revolution will start. Governments always do the wrong thing. They never do the right thing except at gunpoint. There will be a revolution. It will be worldwide. And there's actually some great thinking. Ray Dalio is a perfect example. There's some wonderful advice. There's some great thinking coming out now. And true leaders, okay, because of the internet, the mainstream media has just totally blown it throughout the world. I mean, they've turned into a bunch of con men and liars, and nobody believes them anymore. But the internet shows like yours, internet sites like mine, there's enough good advice and good information there that people are paying attention to that, and they're listening. And they're angry because they can look at their pocketbook and they can realize they have less money now than they did a year ago. And they want change. And change is good, but it will be done at gunpoint, and the governments are going to fight it tooth and nail, and they're going to lose. And in the end, we will go back to a gold standard, not because anybody in government wanting it, but because we have to. and Hungary and China and Russia and the central banks that are accumulating gold now know intuitively that it's a lot better to own some gold or silver than it is to own bonds that are essentially worthless.
Well, let's touch on this a little further, Bob. Um, when it comes to the debt situation, Charlie Munger, now sitting in a wheelchair most of the time, 95 years old, um, talked to CNBC a few days ago. Becky Quick, the blind commentator, asked him about the debt, the national debt, and he said that subject is as enjoyable as thinking about my own death. So even the optimists, the the people that are in favor of corporate America and the free market system in America, like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, his partner, even they, and I'll tell you the quote from Munger was really surprising. He said, where is Britain and where is Rome today?" And he said we're in the same decline. The United States is a fallen empire, and I was just taken back by that a little bit, just because of how optimist Charlie has been about the prospects for the United States. Now, I'll obviously let you comment on this, but Buffett was on Charlie Rose with Bill Gates a year ago, and Charlie Rose asked him about the future, and he said, "Look, the future is that America will stick as a very wealthy country. It will not be the leading empire, but it will be a very wealthy country. We will keep growing our GDP at 2 to 3%, which means that in every generation, people will be, in general, richer, but a smaller piece of the pie will go towards the general population, and the people that can specialize and enjoy benefit the system, understand the system, benefit from it, will be uber rich." In other words, he's predicting a future where more and more people will join the ranks of the lower class, and there will be less a shrinking middle class, no middle class in fact, and then he predicts a lot of subsidies. Misplaced people at 40, at 45, they don't have a career anymore because the job has been either just evaporated from the planet. Outsourced, robotized, doesn't matter. He's talking about a future where people will need government aid all the time because they're going to be misplaced. And I want to ask you, why are people reaching those positions? Is it because of the education system in developed countries that just does not prepare people for the 21st century at all? Or is it something else? What is the cause, the root cause that creates this situation where Buffett is basically envisioning a universal basic income, because most people in the United States and in developed countries will just be servants to the free market system instead of enjoying it?
I disagree with Warren Buffett on two issues. One, and it's so obvious that I'm surprised he hasn't changed his mind. Warren Buffett hates gold. He thinks the idea of going in and spending millions of dollars to open a gold mine and extracting the gold and making it into bars and then storing it in banks is a total waste of time and effort. And I think that's patently absurd. As an individual, do you need a reserve?
Well, and I've touched upon this point many times. If he compares gold to stocks, fine. There is no comparison. Stocks are wealth generators, and gold is a wealth preserver. But if he would have taken Berkshire Hathaway's cash reserves and converted them into gold, my God, his shareholder would be so much better off in the past 19 years. It's just unbelievable. Gold has even outperformed stocks. So I totally agree with you.
He has a total blind spot when it comes to gold. that is patently absurd. And I'm going to get off subject for just a minute. I have just written another book talking about basic investing in resources. And in the book, I try to make the point that there's a time to be in resources, a time not to be in resources. And right now it's a good time to be in resources. He doesn't get it. Now, when you examine the policies of a company or a country, to understand it truly, you have to compare it to your own situation. Now, the question that I asked you was, do you need a reserve? Do you need an emergency fund for health care? Do you need an emergency fund for car repairs? Do you need an emergency fund for vacation? Of course, any reasonable person would say, of course I do. Yes. Well, governments need exactly the same thing. And you are totally correct. Gold is a wealth preserver, and there's a time to be in it. And I find it very funny that a guy as astute as Warren Buffett simply doesn't get it. Going back to the education system, Warren Buffett believes the system works. When anyone with two eyes and two ears can look and hear what's going on and realize that clearly the system is failing, and it's failing for most people. Now, I happen to be an anarchist, but I am an equal opportunity anarchist. I despise all governments equally. But if you look at the Swiss government, and I wrote 2 books while I was staying with a friend in Switzerland. When you look at the Swiss government and you look at the Swiss economy, you can't really figure out how it works, okay? The president of Switzerland is a titular position, and in fact, his biggest role is that he's the head of the Swiss guards who guard the Pope in Rome, okay? They have some kind of government in Switzerland, and people pay taxes in Switzerland, and things just kind of work. But what you do not have in Switzerland is government interference in everything. I could go on for hours talking about the stupidity of the French labor laws and how difficult they make it is. They make it to do everything. The tax situation in France just utterly out of control. They create a situation where you cannot hire a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter and pay him a reasonable price and actually get things done. The economy just kind of stumbles along because of all these insane rules.
Geez, I even heard that police comes to offices at about 7 p.m. in regions of Paris to make sure that employers did not task people with overtime.
Yeah, well, France is a great example of a revolution that went off course, okay? And I support revolutions. I agree with Thomas Jefferson that every country deserves a good revolution on a regular basis. I think change is a good thing, but we need less government. The best analogy that I can give you is the EU and Brussels. I wrote an article, and don't quote me on these numbers because they're not accurate, but there was something like 12,000 regulations that had to do with producing milk, and there were 204 regulations on washcloths, and there were 450 regulations on toothbrushes. If you get a bunch of bureaucrats and give them unlimited money and say make up rules, they just go nuts. And as long as you keep paying them, they keep making up rules. In Switzerland, the government doesn't make up rules, okay? they've got a system that more or less works, and they leave you alone, and they encourage you to make money, and they encourage you to be wealthy, and the people in Switzerland are wealthy, and it's a great idea. Now, when you start getting into the government's going to do everything for you, let me give you a perfect example. Do you know who, if I talk about AOC, do you know who I'm talking about?
I'm sorry, say that again?
AOC, Alpha Oscar Charlie.
No, tell me.
The congresswoman, 29-year-old congresswoman from Jersey. Okay, I'm going to call her AOC because those are her initials. Her last name's Cortez. She's very popular because she's come out and says we need to have the rich pay for everything. We need to pay them or charge them 70% income tax on their income. Someone asked her about the three branches of American government. Now, do you happen to know what those three branches are? Okay, you were very close, and you're not an American, but you understood intuitively. You got to have a judiciary, you got to have executive branch, you got to have somebody make the laws. She was asked about the three branches of government. She said the president, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Now, if you were an eighth grade student in the United States and you took a test about the three branches of government, and you said Congress and the Senate and the President, you would fail the course. And we took this idiot and made her the hero, the darling of the left and the progressives, because she has learned how to get votes. And the way to get votes is to tell people you're going to give them free shit. Well, people love free shit. Okay? Everybody loves free shit. But somebody has to pay for it, and that never occurred to her. So this dimwit who couldn't pass an eighth grade civics exam is coming up with these great suggestions. We're going to have free medical care, and we're going to have free college, and if you don't work, we're going to give you free everything. There is no free lunch in life. If you will leave people alone, if government will get off the backs of people, they manage to organize themselves fairly well. Nothing has changed in all of history except how inefficient governments are. With the internet, we don't need big government. Okay, how is France better off by attacking Syria? Or England better off by attacking Iraq? Or the United States better off by attacking Afghanistan? And the answer is not at all. War is an extremely wasteful exercise. Every empire in history has collapsed when they got into military adventurism, and the United States is taking that route now. Warren Buffett, because he has billions of dollars invested in the system, has to assume the system works and it will continue to work. And I don't have billions of dollars invested in the system, so I don't have to make that assumption. And I can assure you with great confidence, the system is failing, and it's going to get worse, and we need to have change. And the change, believe it or not, is literally as simple as going back to honest money.
Bob, lastly, where can people check out your work? And then can you tell people a little bit about this new book?
Okay. People have been bugging me for years to write a basic book about investing in resources. And I've always thought it was a good idea, and I was just too damn lazy to do it. I finally sat down and wrote it. It took me 16 days, and literally it took me 3 weeks to get the cover right. But I've released it. It's on Amazon right now. It's called Basic Investing in Resources. And I say there's a time to be involved in resources and time not to be involved in resources. One of the smartest guys in Canada who has made $1 billion out of it is Frank Ustra. And when BRIEX happened in 1996, he quit. He got out of resources 100%, stopped, and he started making movies. And then in 2001, right at the very bottom, he came back into resources. There's a time to be in resources and time not to be in resources. And it really is that simple. Now, everybody has a choice now. You can invest in paper assets of no real value, or you can invest in real assets. And my suggestion is very strong that you invest in real assets, because we have a Force 10 storm coming. The smartest people in the world all know it. And if you're going to make it through, you got to protect yourself and you got to protect your family. And the best way to do that is to own some resources.
Bob321gold.com is the website. Obviously on Amazon, $12.99 for the book, if I'm not mistaken. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Well, it's fun. We always do this at interesting times. We failed to mention Bitcoin, but we managed to nail the top last time. And now the real opportunity is going to be in resources.
Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been fun.